Amy opened her eyes, and the child came forward, moving across the floor with small, even, determined steps, as if she were walking down the center aisle of a church, spreading flowers before a bride. She kept her eyes on Amy the whole time. Those blue, piercing eyes cut through flesh, sinew, and marrow, and examined the soul. Amy's first intuition was to push back into the headboard, maybe even pull the covers up for some sense of protection or barrier. But the girl was so young and delicate, so innocent, she was hardly a threat. Her blonde hair was mussed from sleep, and her dress wrinkled. Such a beautiful little dress, white with tiny blue flowers. But what grabbed Amy's attention much more than anything were those eyes. She never had seen such a striking shade of blue. She was a remarkable child indeed, and in fact looked exactly how Amy had imagined her own daughter. That thought sent waves of prickles up and down Amy's arms, and her flesh dimpled. Jim must have noticed her response, for he put a hand on her arm and said, "Honey, this is Louisa. She's 9. Louisa, this is Miss Amy." The girl Louisa stood beside Amy, her arms at her sides. If ever an angel came in human flesh, this is her, Amy thought. She suddenly had a lump in her throat, and she had to struggle to swallow past it. "Hello, Louisa." Louisa didn't smile, but her eyes seemed to glow with some queer sense of recognition. "Miss Amy?" Then the child lifted her hand and placed it on Amy's abdomen, low, below the navel, and closed her eyes. Her touch, the feel of her hand so light and gentle, rendered Amy as useless as if she'd been struck by a bolt of lightning. She wanted to push Louisa's hand away, tell her that area, that blessed, cursed area, was off limits, but she couldn't move, couldn't even speak. There was something special, mystical, magical. No, it couldn't be about the child's touch, something that sent involuntary shivers along Amy's body. Louisa suddenly snapped her head up and opened her eyes. There was such hurt in them, such pity. Tears pooled along the bottom lid. "You're hurt," she said, and her voice quivered like a wind-blown leaf. Amy wanted to say yes, she was hurt and wounded and scarred. She had the sudden urge to shout it, to release all the pent-up emotion, the fear, the great sense of loss she'd carried around for the past 6 months. She wanted to take this child, this Louisa, in her arms and hold her, but she couldn't. She was still paralyzed, still mute. All this time Jim said nothing. Amy barely noticed he was there except for his hand still on her arm. He seemed just as transfixed by what was happening as she was. Louisa kept one hand on Amy's abdomen and smeared tears across her face with the other. She sniffed. "You are loved, Miss Amy. He adores you so much." Amy found her voice, but that was it. The rest of her felt heavy and awkward. "Who?" "God. He hurts with you, but his love is bigger than the hurt. You have to believe that." Amy didn't know what to say. She was again struck mute, not by any physical malady, but by mere ignorance. She believed once that God loved her, but now she didn't understand his way of showing it. Now she felt abandoned, left in some wilderness to fend off the wolves and cold and hunger by herself. "Do you believe it?" Still, Amy said nothing. She couldn't answer. She wasn't sure if she believed it or not. Louisa tilted her head slightly to the left, and the corners of her mouth curved upward ever so gently. "There's still life in you." Amy didn't feel alive. She felt dead, like she'd perished with her baby daughter and now walked the earth as a zombie, trapped in her body, but not really living. Then suddenly Amy's strength returned, her ability to perform voluntary actions, and she was seized by a feeling of panic. Quickly she pushed Louisa's hand away. "Jim!" Jim jumped up from the bed and walked around to the child. "Louisa, honey, let's you and me go downstairs and get some breakfast, okay?" Louisa nodded. Jim ushered her from the room, leaving Amy alone with a weird burning in her abdomen. It was not uncomfortable, but odd enough that it caused her to rub the area. The girl had affected her in ways she could never have imagined. There was something about her, this Louisa, something peculiar yet attractive, odd yet oddly familiar, something that put an ill of uneasiness in Amy's stomach.